Welcome back to Digging Deeper Ag Chats with Al. If you tuned in 2 weeks ago, you'll know we hit pause on a jam-packed episode with Dr. Enoch Bergman, who's a veterinarian, cattle specialist, and all-round champion of better herd health. In today's episode, we're diving straight into yard weaning best practices, early weaning nutritional challenges, and some seriously valuable insight into fixed-timed AI programs, including Enoch's favourite protocols and what he's seen work on the ground with real producers. We also explore how to build a better cow from the start, how timing impacts fertility and profitability, and why improving animal welfare starts on farm, not in the boardroom. If you missed part 1, go back and have a listen, as it sets the foundation for what we're unpacking today. So let's get stuck in. You mentioned yard weaning.
Yeah.
How do you go about it? What's the best practice?
A lot of the emphasis on yard weaning was about acclimatization to people and bunks, and I think that's all great. A caveat that I've got for people is don't get the stocking density too high. I think I've seen the emergence of unexpected disease with a couple of my clients that are yard weaning, and as they got more cows, they were a bit more crowded. Yeah. And we already started seeing some of the syndromes that we see at the feedlot. We were seeing them in the calves. But essentially, I want to try to get them off their mothers. Try to keep, if you can, keep the mothers close. That kind of tends to quieten them down a little bit. Get them some time together, and when they start getting quiet, then I want to get them out in the paddock. And when I talk to my guys that procure cattle, I say, try to see if you can get them where they've had 4 weeks when they were weaned before you procure them into the feedlot. Now, there's a lot of producers out there that either don't have the facilities or don't have the feedstuffs to run those cattle, and so that's why they put them straight on a truck, or they only want to keep them for a week or what have you. But the evidence seems to be that if we can keep them longer from the point of weaning, that we're going to get a better outcome, and I think it's worth doing. And if we, and I'd love to see more cooperation between producers and lot feeders and via the agent or however of communicating that value proposition to the feedlotter to look after the cow-calf guy for preparing those animals for the feedlot, because the performance of the feedlot is dictated mostly by what the cow-calf producer does. And so there are good vaccines out there as well. Like in a beautifully perfect world, I'd love to see the vaccinations occur while they're still on their mom prior to weaning, but that for a lot of people's would be difficult logistically. So because you got vaccination versus immunization. So vaccinating is to give something an antigen, cause an immune response. Immunization is the immune system responding to that. So if you vaccinate an animal under stress, you're going to get a reduced impact. So if you got animals that got weaned straight onto a truck, go to a sale yard, go to a feedlot, and the feedlot out of desperation is giving them RhinoGuard and maybe Bovis Shield MH1 at arrival, they're kind of already stressed, already potentially succumbing to IBR or what have you. You're not going to get as good of an immune response as if we can do it in a more quiet, sedate, peaceful sort of environment. So if you kind of keep that in the back of your head, like the either MH plus IBR, say, 1 dose at weaning and another dose 4 weeks later before they go, or RhinoGuard and a Bovis Shield MH1, which is a single off dose. Maybe wean them, wait 2 weeks, give them a Bovis Shield and a RhinoGuard 2 weeks later, and then 2 weeks later they're heading off. That way they've got the immune response has responded. I guess work with the feedlots that you're supplying with. Work with your local veterinarian. Try all things.
And are you weaning over in Esperance by calendars or by calf weights? Or I
guess we're just doing a PDS right now on early weaning, just to see, we know that calves, when they're on their mothers, initially, as you know, they're essentially have a simple stomach, so their rumen's not functional. And then by the time they're about 150 kilos, their rumen starts to develop. And then once their rumen's developed, a lot of that milk gets squandered. So about half of it gets wasted. So it's inefficient to try to get a cow to produce milk to feed a calf that it's not going to be able to do anything with.
I read some of your numbers in your slideshow I found, and it's actually quite staggering.
Yeah.
The difference of energy requirement just for the cow to produce that milk when you translate it back to the grass.
But then the caveat to that is that whilst that's true, you have to have your production system geared around that sort of model. If you're going to wean really early like that, I think you have to have a plan for those calves. And calves require more protein than cows. So classic inesperance, got Kaikia paddocks, and in the summertime, the protein's quite low. The cows will maintain okay.
Yeah.
Maybe even gain weight, but the calves just won't go forward once they're off their mothers, and so then you end up where if you can't continue to put condition and weight on your calves, then you've kind of painted yourself into a corner, and then you got a bunch of fat cows because you weaned early.
Yeah.
You kind of got to gear the system, I think, whether that's about integrating forage, whether that's creep feeding before weaning, and then transitioning those calves onto lick feeders or pellets or what have you. But we're still exploring that. So in the PDS that we've just done, we found that we just weren't able to keep those calves that were taken off their mothers moving forward. We saw substantial differences, visual differences, and weight differences in the mothers that had the calves pulled off of them, but we still haven't been able to work out, what did we gain versus what did we lose. And for guys that tended to not background their calves, they didn't get an opportunity to pick up that weight loss difference. They didn't get a chance to compensate for it.
We're going to shift gears a little bit. You mentioned a few times about AI.
Yeah.
Just last year, completed a fixed time AI demonstration here.
Oh, sweet.
With some young Angus heifers. First time I've ever done it. Extremely interested. You mentioned Alison before. She was the one that actually
Brilliant.
ran it with Chelsea. Learnt a lot, but it's so much more complicated than first meets the eye.
Aye.
Run us through a few things,
Yeah.
why we would do it, and then some of
yeah.
the stumbling blocks, I guess.
Well, you got to tell me about your trial design, though, just for interest.
So it was just a very simple one. We wanted to introduce producers in the area
Yep.
to a lot of dairy guys use it around here.
Absolutely.
Not a
Yep.
whole lot of beef.
A lot of fixed time in their heifers, but heat detection in their cows, I assume, in the
Yep.
dairies. Yep.
Yep. And then, so we wanted to do fixed time. So we had 15 young heifers, Angus, come in. We used Cedars, Cedar program.
Yep.
Pop them on a fixed time. We're going to do 2 join-ins.
2 rounds of AI? Or?
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. But the stickers
With
didn't
a
come.
resync?
Yeah, the resync came back with no scratch stickers.
Okay, yep.
So we didn't go back in.
Yep.
And we've only had about a 55% join-in. So
Yep.
the local technician said either something's gone really, really well, which he didn't assume, or we're going to see that sort of result. So
Yep. We used to do a lot of 2-round programs, and that was my frustration with it, was the on the resyncs where you're using heat detection as a trigger to AI them again, there are some animals that just won't represent.
yeah.
And so that used to, and my goal is to get as many pregnancies as I can, as early as I can. So then those animals, if you're going to back them up, those animals that don't come back on heat the second time, assuming you're going to put a backup bull in, now they're delayed another 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So I've kind of tried to encourage my producers to join more heifers and just stick with 1 round, and then back them up with bulls. Or I'll do another program where I'll AI them, and then we'll start another program where we'll put a device in, and then when we pull the device, we'll preg test.
Yeah.
And if they're empty, they'll get a shot of prostaglandin, and if they're pregnant, they won't get the prostaglandin, obviously, because that would have knocked the first baby out. As another method, they do that a lot in South America, and they'll go pretty early, like around 35 days or even earlier, 30 days, what have you. And there are some blood tests that you can use that are they're reasonably specific, but they're sensitive. Sorry, they're sensitive, but they're not exceptionally specific. But I think it'll catch most of. You shouldn't knock out any pregnancies with that blood test. As another, it's called the Alertus system. So I did a bit of modeling on that and presented it at the Wagyu conference. But going back to my own story, as far as the synchronization programs, there's a lot of different protocols, and people often ask, like, what's the best program? You can almost find lit on any particular program showing a better result if you look at any individual program. But the one that I've kind of grown to like a fair bit is, and I call it the Warrnable protocol.
The Warrnable?
Yeah, and it's not actually called the Warrnable protocol, but that's just what I call it, because John Kelly from Warrnable gave it to me, and it's pretty common down here. And it was kind of built around dairymen, so that there was no work on the weekends, starting on a Friday. So it's an insert on the Friday or any day of the week, and of the device, and then I'll give them a shot of estradiol. Now, for EU accredited, you can't use estradiol,
right?
But over in WA, it's not really much of an issue. So put a progesterone or Q-mate or DIB, whatever your product is, put that in and give it a shot of estradiol. And what estradiol does is it's very good at resetting the follicular wave. So what does that mean? Well, the cow's ovaries, there's 2 of them, and they go through, about every 7 days, they go through a follicular wave. And what that means is that all these little tiny follicles. So just like humans, cows are born with all their eggs in one basket, right? And every 7 days, they get all these little blisters in their ovaries, a whole bunch of them, and they all start kind of developing along together. And when there's progesterone in the way, what happens is that then they regress. And then they'll come up again another 7 days, and then they'll regress. And then prostaglandin is released by the cow, the CL goes away. In that third follicular wave, there's no progesterone in the way, so it'll develop,
Yep.
and it'll choose a dominant follicle. And that dominant follicle will grow, it'll get quite big, full of fluid, and have an egg in it, and it'll pop and go down the fallopian tube, and that fills in with luteal tissue, and that's what maintains the pregnancy, the CL. So what the estradiol does is it resets the follicular wave. So a cow at any stage of the pregnancy or any stage of the cycle, we can go in and go, bang, here's some estradiol, and if it's 3 days in or 4 days in or 7 days in, it just starts over and goes, right, all right, everyone back to ready, on your marks, get set, go. Then a week later, we'll come in and we'll give them a shot of prostaglandin. And the idea there is that some of them may have a CL, some won't. And what we're doing is we're flicking off that CL. We're like, ding, ding, so it's gone. So now it's just wholly reliant on the progesterone device.
Yep.
Then 3 days later, we'll pull the device out. And what I like about this protocol is if I pull it at 8, I'm AIing 48 hours later. So if I've got, say, 1,000 head that a guy wants to AI, I'll say, righty-o, we're going to pull the first group of 250 at 7 a.m. on Thursday. And then we're going to pull the next group of 250 at 1 p.m. on Thursday. And then on Friday at 7 a.m. we're going to pull 250. And then at 1 p.m. we're going to pull another 250. And then I'll be there 48 hours later to morning, afternoon. And I clump them into groups of a morning and afternoon, which seems to work pretty well. So that one's real simple. It's 4 handlings, which is kind of a downer. But it's estradiol at the front end, prostaglandin at pull, and then I give them GnRH to anything that doesn't rub. And the more, let's put the sticker on their back. So the more that rub, the happier I am. I'm like, yeah, this is going to be awesome. And if only half of them rub, I go, ugh. So you can forecast a little bit. And then that way, you know how it goes. Bad news is best delivered early. So I can kind of check with folks. But I've got other programs like JSync, which is Javier went to Argentina with some other vets, and we learned about it. Device in on the Tuesday, estradiol, pull it out on the Monday of the next week, so 6-day insertion, pull it out at noon with equine chorionic gonadotropin mixed with bioestrovet, mixed with your prostaglandin, and then so that's on the Tuesday, and then on the Monday, and then on the Thursday we'll AI 8 a.m. That works pretty good, and that's only 3 handlings, but it's a lot of drugs mixed together.
So you said one of the downfalls, and one of the things we noticed is the heifer started to get a bit snootier every time we brought them in, because you are handling them all.
Okay. So that's pretty cool, and it's in my presentation.
Yeah.
So going back to, I haven't mentioned it yet, but so we did a PDS in esperance, and what we did is I've been AIing in esperance for quite some time, and I had a number of fairly large producers that hadn't embraced AI.
Yeah.
So we within our producer group, A Sheep and Beef, we put up an application for a PDS to demonstrate the benefit of integrating fixed time AI in commercial heifer mating programs. So then I went to these guys who were kind of on the fence, and that was the key. You had to have not AI'd before, and said, we're getting some subsidization to make this work for this PDS.
That often gets farmers over the line.
Yeah. So it's the guys that were kind of on the fence. They're like, all right, we're in. So what we did is we just, based on the last digit of the ear tag, they either got synchronized and AI'd, or they went straight to the bulls. So the guys had already bought. So this was late in the season. In the end, because of the paperwork and getting it all done, I ended up carrying the project and assuming that we were going to get funding, and I was able to get paid back because I went ahead and just bought the drugs myself. But we got rolling on it, and so that was either AI'd or straight to the bulls. 10 days later, they got boxed, and then they spent the rest of their time together. And so we measured conception rate, we measured dystocia, we measured calf loss, we measured heifer loss, we measured weaning weights when we could get it, and we measured rebreeding rates. Pretty cool. But then we had our survey at the front, and there was a whole bunch of questions. Like, 1, is this going to be hard work? 2, is it going to make my heifers crazy? And you know what we found, and it is so true when we were preg testing. They definitely, I think after several days in a row, they start to get a little bit like, what are you doing to me now?
Yeah.
But at preg test, they were different animals.
Yes.
They were so much quieter at preg test. The ones that have been AI'd versus the ones that were naturally mated. And it's in the presentation that I've got. But every producer said that the heifers got much quieter out of the process.
Yep. So initially,
super rad.
sometimes got a bit snooty, but then future yardings.
I think because it's just so many days in a row. It's kind of like, like, bloody hell, Dad.
Yeah, or even just
I got
walking
to clean my room again?
Yeah, walking them down the lane while they got slower and slower each day.
Yeah.
Just because they're like, oh, not again. We know we're not getting any new feed or anything.
Aye. But it was super rad. And then I remember one of our bigger producers, the next year we were doing it, and I think we were AIing or we were getting it set up or something. And I said to him, hey, Simon, what do you reckon? And he goes, oh, it seems like a lot of work. And all of his workers just like lost their shit. Like, fuck off, Simon. You're not out here pulling calves. Because it's just that was the amazing thing. So what we saw was an improvement in conception rate, which you'd expect because you're corralling. We're AI. Most guys are 7 weeks. Wait 10 days, put the bull in for 6 weeks. So you're getting more opportunities to try to get pregnant. You're getting 2 1/3 opportunities in the naturally mates versus AI in 2 rounds. So 3 rounds optimally. So we got an increase in conception rate. I think 0.8. We got a
earlier calving.
Oh man, yeah. 8.3 days on average. And then we got we halved our dystocia. We reduced calf mortality by half. We reduced heifer mortality by 90%. The calves were 15 kilos heavier in the AI and backed up group compared to the natural mates. So that's AI and backup versus just bulls. So it wasn't like just AI versus bulls. It was AI and backup versus just bulls. So it's a system approach, not like AI versus bulls, but AI and backup versus just bulls. But they're the same bulls. So it's fair. And then the rebreeding rate was like 4.5% better, which was really good because, as you alluded, we got them to calve early. And as a veterinarian, my job as my whole goal is to make my producers more profitable without sacrificing welfare outcomes. The focus is on trying to get trying to get 3-year-olds to calve early by having already calved as a heifer. So I'm trying to get those girls to calve nice and tight, as many as I can get pregnant to calve as 3-year-olds without any calving trouble. Set them up to succeed by getting them to calve early as a 2-year-old. Get back in calf early to calve early as a 3-year-old. Then up one. Then they'll be there forever. Yeah,
it seems like setting them up early on pays dividends. Like that 3rd and 4th and for the rest of their life. And if we keep on letting it drift out a little bit, we see some big hits.
And trying to pull it back. When I first got to Esperance, most of the producers, when I first moved there, most of the guys were joining for about 3 months, from memory. And almost all of them were joining their heifers the same date as their cows because they're like, well, that's when you put the bulls out. But what I initially got guys to do, to consider doing, and pretty much all of them embraced it, is to join their heifers 2 or 3 weeks ahead of the cows and to join their heifers for shorter. Because what I got them to kind of come to terms with was that a heifer that gets in calf late, like calves on the same day as the last cow to calve, she's going to be empty next year. Because cows take about 55 days after they calve to start falling pregnant again. So they only get about 30 days up their sleeve because they're pregnant for about 280 days. It takes 55 days, 365 days in a year. So they've only got 30 days up their sleeve. So the other way of putting it is only the girls that calve in the first 30 days are cycling when the bull goes in. And then they'll start coming on, and that's why we get 90%. In heifers, it takes about 90 days.
Oh, a lot longer.
Yeah. So essentially, if you join the heifers the same as the cows, none of the heifers are probably cycling when they come back around for that second calving, or only a handful will be. Versus if we AI them, like in the MLA trial that we did, so I think 70% of the heifers that were in the AI integrated group calved before the due date. So we had 70% of the heifers already ready to go when the bulls went out, and then there was that backup bull section that came on later.
And that's something you actually haven't touched on, is the ability to look at ASBVs on the straws that you're putting into the say the heifers to get a short gestation or things like that.
Yep, so. And the bulls that I'm targeting for my AI programs for my heifers are all the same, low birth weight, high weaning weight, and that is primarily driven by short gestation length.
Yeah,
I love short GL bulls because if I can get those calves out, 5 days, 6 days, 7 days, 8 days early, that's another 5, 6, 7, 8 days for that uterus to involute so that heifer's ready to rock.
Yeah.
And we haven't yet reached a stage where, I'm hoping one day that I'll AI a cow and I'll have to jump out of the crush quick so she doesn't calve on me. But I don't think we've hit the wall yet on going too early, because the bulls that I'm targeting, because they're high weaning weight, they're often pretty substantial calves when they're born. But their birth weights are on breed plan are probably like between 0 and 3. Yeah, it's super cool. I love it. Yeah, it's rad. It's changing lives, changing heifer lives, turning them into good cows, building better cows, brother.
Well, that's a good little segue, because you have actually spoken at the Gippsland Red Meat Conference, and the title of your speech is what builds a better cow.
Yeah.
Now, we're not actually going to bother too much because we've covered a lot of things that you're talking about, but we will make this available online. So listeners, listen out. And you've told me that they're going to actually have to slow down your speech, not speed it up, because you've got a lot to cover in a fairly short time. So
yeah, it's only a couple hundred slides.
Yeah.
But we got a good 10 minutes to do it.
Yeah, and he's not actually joking either. The IT techs were having a bit of a freak out before, but they've sorted it out, hopefully. We will just quickly touch on WARRACK.
Yeah, WARRACK is awesome, like SALRAC and NAVRAC.
Yeah. Just quickly, what does WARRACK stand for?
West Australian Livestock Research Council.
Yeah. Now, you've been a volunteer on that council for a long time.
I was the AVA appointee, so the Australian Veterinary Association. When I was president of Australian Cattle Vets, one of the things that I felt that we needed to do more of is we're a great member organization, and we had a lot of great veterinarians. We'd all get together and share ideas and camaraderie and work to do things that would make us do a better job for our clients. But we weren't very strong in the advocacy space as far as working more directly with producers. So I feel like I had a lot to do with saying we need to really get out there and put ourselves in a position to where we're liaising with ALEC, WARRACK, MLA, et cetera. And so I think that's been our focus for the last probably 10 years or so. And one of those things that came out of it was the appointee for WARRACK. It was just awesome. So MLA's got a pile of proceeds. We got producers out there, and we're kind of the conduit. So a bunch of great farmers and producers on there. Essentially, we get we do field days. We canvass the audience to get advice. What do you think is going to help you be more profitable? What's going to benefit you? What's going to benefit our industry? And then we just kind of sit in rooms and sift through that and try to find the best investments that we can, and then encourage and give that advice to MLA, and then they act on that advice with other
So members of WARRACK are not suits; they're actually boots.
They're farmers,
which is pretty cool.
And it's a really diverse group, and it's fantastic. Just some of the best people I've ever worked with.
So you get obviously a really diverse perspectives in WARRACK. What do you see, or what does WARRACK see as some of the key strengths and opportunities in Australian beef currently?
Well, a lot of the effort of WARRACK has been around trying to, for us, fill the autumn feed gap over there, trying to, the feed 365 sort of model, trying to figure out ways to shore up, because we know we live in a very volatile climate, and I guess trying to find ways to assist people to identify strategies to have a more biodiverse forage base so that they can continue to look after their animals regardless of obviously you can't always look after them, but the best job we can of looking after them in trying conditions. But a lot of emphasis there. There's been some push in WA of trying to see if we can drive some research to look at time of calving a little bit. It's something I talk about in my talk. Sometimes I think we calve really early in WA, quite a few people, and it puts those cows under a lot of stress. And I try to evaluate that. And essentially, it's just about trying to find evidence to help people to, continue to refine their practices in order to optimize outcomes, both financially and from the welfare of the animals.
That's really good work. And on there, you'd see a lot of the challenges that we're facing and roadblocks. What do you see as one of the bigger challenges that we're facing?
I think one of the biggest issues, and the dinner talk, which we'll have a little bit later, is I feel that there's a remarkable lack of empathy for people that have been divested from ag. I mean, historically, people mostly had family or friends that were still on the land producing for people. But as we've had rationalization within our industry, and the same thing's happening in the U.S., like the country I grew up in, I think I said at the beginning, they gave us 160 acres each, but most of the farms at home, if you're not running 4,000 or 5,000 acres, you're not making a living. So they've just all coalesced. We're seeing the same thing here. So the onus of feeding the community and feeding the planet is falling on fewer and fewer people. But we're so busy doing it that we've lost sight of ensuring that we keep those guys aware of what we're doing. And we've left them, well, the term is an echo chamber. We've left them through their own devices to develop their own rhetoric without any input from us. And I think as a challenge, we need to not be offended by people that are detractors from our industry. We need to, when we identify opportunities, extol the virtues of what we're doing, because by God, we're all in it for the right reason. Like I was trying to say at the beginning, every farmer I know loves animals more than those people in Perth that are trying to do what they can through donating to various groups, thinking they're doing the right thing. But that's because they're being told, give us money and we'll make welfare better, We're out there actually on the ground. We are the animal activists. If we're actively improving the welfare of animals daily. We're the animal activists, but we've allowed other people to steal that name and actually steal our calves and put up picket signs and say that producing protein is a bad thing. But we're creating life, man.
So part of that is us opening that back up that communication.
We need to be on the front foot. As a very rough example, we're going to get there with mulesing, with genetics eventually. When mulesing was first came about, John Mules back in the 50s or 60s, slipped and went, oh, holy cow, this worked.
Was that the origin of mulesing?
Yeah, it was an accident.
Really?
Yeah, and then immediately they tried all sorts of different techniques. They've tried chemicals. They've tried photodynamic agents where they inject it into the skin and then use bright lights shining on the bums of sheep. That was probably in New Zealand.
Right.
And they all these different methodologies to try to find a way to essentially scar down the tissue. And what they found is anything that scars the tissue is inherently a little bit painful. But there are people out there, in Melbourne in the square, dressed up as sheep, with bloody bums and things like that, and big signs. And we need some signs up there of farmers out there trying to deal with fly strike. They need to know that we're out there working hard. I think we're really good at working hard, but we're not very good at communicating. We're not good at we're not good at taking thanks for the job that we're doing. Do you know what I mean? But remarkably, people still viewed farmers as honest and dependable. Like the Super Bowl ad years ago. I'll talk about it in my dinner, not to be a spoiler alert, but that Super Bowl ad, the Dodge Ram pickup trucks, and it had that Paul Harvey, So God Made a Farmer. And you sit there and it's got So God Made a Farmer. And it just talks about farmers and how they grow up and how they look after livestock and how they look after their family. And they don't and they got all these Dodge Ram pickups occasionally showing up in the images. Most of it's guy plowing a field or someone catching a colt or something. And they paid a shitload of money for that spot. And you're like, why did they do that? Did they talk about the horsepower of that Cummins? Nah. They talk about the leather seats and they talk about the air conditioner and what a ripper it is and the beautiful Allison rip-off transmission. Nah. They just talked about farmers. Why is that? Well, because people still believe, and it's true, that we're hardworking and dependable. That's what they want to be associated with. We've lost sight of that because we listen to the 2%ers. And then when you sit on a plane and someone sits down next to you and says, I'm a vegan, and you're a farmer, and you're the devil. I just go, oh, wow. I'm pretty lucky, actually, because being a veterinarian, they're like, hey, you're a veterinarian, I love animals. Well, me too. Yeah. They go, oh, look, I don't eat meat at all. And I go, yeah, I really struggle to eat wheat products, because monoculture by definition excludes biodiversity. And I just love animals way too much not to eat beef. What? Yeah.
It's challenging, but I think there's positive people out there making good waves at the minute.
Yeah, have you seen the Peterson brothers in the U.S. that did all those? They did all the video. They changed the lyrics of different songs.
Yes, yeah.
Stuff like that. I feel the pendulum swinging in a big way. Yeah. And it's all going to come back to us a bit.
Big synthetic push a couple of years ago, but people are starting to go back to a bit more natural stuff, and part of that is what we do, which is good. Now we're going to wrap up the interview very quickly. One question we always ask at the very end is, we're always learning something, but what is something you've learned recently that surprised you?
Oh, it's I was going to say that I was shocked to see that Australia had such a high stocking density down in these southern agricultural regions. It just completely surprised the heck out of me when I moved here. But something I learned recently that really surprised me, I was doing some work just reading up about sheep. You know where the world's largest population of sheep is?
It's not Australia, I know that. Biggest exporter, but...
It's China.
Yes, yeah.
Unbelievable, hey.
Yeah.
Hey, the other, you know where the world's largest cattle population is?
Brazil.
India.
Yep. Because none of them die.
That's it.
Yeah.
And if you look at the graphs in the U.S. of the production, the number of livestock in the U.S. has been declining steadily. But if you look at the number of tons of beef produced, it's steadily increasing.
Bigger and heavier.
Bigger, heavier, and die earlier.
Yeah.
What does that equal? Less methane production.
There you go. Nice note to finish on.
Yeah.
Well, Enoch, thanks very much for coming in.
Thanks, Hal.
It's been really good. Cheers. Time for a beer.
All right, let's do it.
A big thank you for tuning in today. And remember, if you have a question about today's episode or a topic you'd like us to cover, reach out to one of our many platforms and join the conversation. We're here because of your passion and commitment to agriculture. Together, we can build a stronger farming future.
This podcast is made possible by the Future Drought Fund Regional Drought Resilience Planning Program, co-funded by the Victorian and Australian governments.